This ship weighs tens of thousands of tons, yet engineers built a system capable of lifting ships like it roughly 85 feet above sea level, using mostly water and gravity. Before this canal existed, ships traveling between the Atlantic and Pacific could face the enormous journey around South America. For centuries, people looked at the narrow Isthmus of Panama and imagined an obvious shortcut. Why sail thousands of extra miles when the oceans seemed so close together? But from the ground, Panama looked nothing like a shortcut. There was jungle, rivers, brutal rainfall, unstable ground, and the Continental Divide. The simplest idea sounded almost insane. Dig a trench from one ocean to the other, and keep digging until the entire channel reached sea level. But one man had already helped accomplish something the world thought impossible. Ferdinand de Lesseps had led the development of the Suez Canal. His reputation was enormous. If engineers could cut through Egypt, why couldn't they cut through Panama? In 1881, the French effort began. Money poured in, machinery arrived, thousands of workers came to Panama, and confidence was everywhere. Then Panama started fighting back. Equipment that worked elsewhere struggled here. Rain turned work sites into mud, rock slowed excavation, and the mountains weren't going anywhere. French hospitals tried to protect patients from insects by placing water around bedposts and flower beds. They didn't yet understand the danger. Those pools of standing water created excellent breeding sites for mosquitoes carrying yellow fever and malaria. Workers who entered hospitals for completely different illnesses could be exposed to deadly mosquito-borne disease. Eventually, some workers became. One story captures just how devastating the situation became. Engineer Jules Dingler arrived in Panama, determined to bring order to the struggling project. Yellow fever killed his oldest daughter, then his 20-year-old son. His daughter's fiancé died too. About a year later, Dingler's wife also died from yellow fever. Panama had taken almost his entire family. Dingler eventually returned to France and never came back. But disease wasn't the only enemy. Engineers discovered another terrifying problem. The ground itself wouldn't stay where they put it. Imagine spending months removing a mountain, only to watch part of that mountain slide straight back into the hole. Every slide meant more excavation, more money, more time. And engineers were beginning to realize that their original assumptions about Panama had. The French project eventually collapsed financially. The dream of simply carving a sea-level canal had collided with reality.
After years of work, enormous losses and terrible human suffering, the canal still didn't connect the oceans.
Then, in 1904, the United States took over the construction effort. But the new team inherited the exact same jungle, mountains, diseases, and unstable ground. One of the most important breakthroughs didn't come from a construction engineer. It came from understanding the mosquito. Crews attacked mosquito breeding grounds, improved sanitation, and screened buildings. Yellow fever was brought under control, while malaria deaths fell dramatically. Controlling disease didn't dig the canal. But without healthier workers, the engineering solution might never have mattered. Now came the decision that would define the Panama Canal. Should they keep trying to bring the land down to sea level or bring the ships up? They chose the second option. Instead of removing enough land to keep ships at sea level, engineers would lift ships into the interior of Panama. But to make that work, engineers needed to control another force that had plagued earlier plans, the Chagres River. The solution was Gatun Dam, an enormous earthen dam that blocked the Chagres River. At the time, it was the largest earthen dam in the world. As the water rose, valleys disappeared. Communities in the future lake area had to move. What had been jungle and river valley transformed into Gatun Lake. At the time, Gatun Lake became the world's largest man-made lake. And suddenly, engineers didn't have to excavate a canal across every mile of Panama. Now imagine you're aboard a ship arriving from the Atlantic. You enter what looks like an enormous concrete chamber. The gates close. Water from Gatun Lake flows into the chamber through enormous passages, and your entire ship begins rising. One chamber after another raises the ship until it reaches Gatun Lake, about 85 feet above sea level. And here's the brilliant part. The original lock system doesn't need gigantic pumps to lift every ship. The water moves from Gatun Lake by gravity. The water rises. The ship floats with it. Engineers aren't physically lifting the ship at all. They're lifting the water underneath it. But before any ship could rise, workers had to build lock chambers on a scale few people had ever seen. The gates themselves were gigantic steel structures, yet they had to repeatedly open, close, and hold back enormous quantities of water. Meanwhile, one obstacle still stood between Gatun Lake and the Pacific, the Continental Divide. At Culebra Cut, workers drilled the rock, packed holes with explosives, blasted the mountains apart, then attacked the debris with enormous steam shovels. The railroad became part of the excavation machine. Dig it, load it, move it, dump it, bring the train back, then repeat millions upon millions of times. Culebra Cut stretched for roughly 9 miles through the Continental Divide. It became one of the greatest excavation challenges of the entire project. And still, the mountains kept moving. One major West Bank slide affected roughly 75 acres and ultimately required around 10 million cubic yards of material to be removed. Estimates for excavation through the cut kept climbing. By 1913, the estimate had reached roughly 100 million cubic yards, slides being a major reason. The project even produced one of America's most famous construction site photographs, President Theodore Roosevelt sitting aboard a giant steam shovel during his visit to Panama. It was powerful publicity. But the photograph also captured the reality of the canal. This wasn't a line being drawn on a map. It was an industrial war against geography. By 1913, the pieces were finally coming together. Steam shovels working through Culebra Cut eventually met at the bottom of the canal. On September 10, 1930, the last steam shovel lifted the final rock of the dry excavation and loaded it onto the last dirt train. After decades of failed plans, disease, explosions, landslides, and excavation, water was finally transforming the construction project into a functioning canal. Then came an almost poetic moment. In January 1914, an old French crane boat became the first self-propelled ocean. On August 15, 1914, the Panama Canal officially opened to commercial traffic. A dream centuries in the making had become infrastructure.
The finished journey is extraordinary. Enter at sea level, rise roughly 85 feet, cross an artificial lake and a cut through the Continental Divide, then descend back to the other ocean. But ships kept getting bigger. More than a century after the original construction, the canal had to evolve again, with larger locks opening in 2016 for a new generation of vessels.
Today, it's easy to see a ship cross Panama and forget what lies underneath that journey. Failed engineering assumptions, and generations of who made the route possible. The Panama Canal is a shortcut, but engineers didn't just cut through Panama. They built enormous locks to raise ships. They lifted them over the landscape using gravity.